Here's a place where all of us can be safe. Our stories of transformation can be safe, and all the things we want to research are safe here. This is Safe Space with Cheyenne. I'm really excited you're here, and I hope you stick around for a while, because I've got a lot to show you before I leave Earth. I love you guys. Hello, my friends. Welcome back into the show. Today we have James Robbins, author of The Call to Climb, Find Your Path, Conquer Your Fears, and Fulfill Your Destiny. And today we get into the danger when you ignore your inner voice. James gets very candid with us about his personal experiences, how it shaped the book that he wrote, and how he overcame imposter syndrome. I'm really excited to get into your book, but I'm always interested in who the person is behind the authorship and how they decided to create the book. So when did this hit you that this book really needed to be out in the world?
Well, have you ever been in a job that you feel like you should like, but you don't like? Like at some point you just like, wait a minute, like, why is this not fulfilling like I thought it would be? And you might even have people saying like, yo, you have the best job. So that was my situation. I was working in a not-for-profit and I felt like I should be happy here, but I wasn't happy. And I thought I'm the problem. Obviously, I'm the problem because everyone else is telling me how lucky I am to be in this position. But that was those early days of what I call the soul or your psyche, your inner life, but the soul nudging you that you are on the wrong path. As much as I thought there's no way this could be the wrong path, but I was on the wrong path. And that's what the soul does. It will nudge us to wake us up. But most people ignore those nudgings. And I did. I ignored it and I just kept plowing on until, eventually I just had just kind of a flame out, if you could call it that, and got really sick and didn't know why. And it was just because I was totally living out of alignment. And so what's interesting back then, Cheyenne, is that I started journaling for the first time and I ended up journaling for years and years and years. And then I was able to look back at some of my journal entries because they introduced this new feature. It's an app that you journal on. They introduced a new feature that you could see the entries from that same day in previous years. So I would log in like September 20th, and it would say, hey, you have 5 entries from September 20th. Do you want to read them? So I'm like, yeah, for sure. I read them. And so I would read them and I would notice that, wait a minute, this is eerily like what I just wrote for today. Like, it's like the same challenges, the same problems, the same fears, the same doubts, the same questions I'm asking. And this is 5 years ago. And it was in that moment that I realized I'm living in this massive repeating loop. And, it reminds me of that anonymous quote that it said that a man only lives 80 years, but really he only lives 1 year, repeated 80 times. And that hit me. And I realized I now can predict my future because it's going to be the same as what it's always been. And that sort of woke me up. And I was like, well, you actually have to make some changes. So that's where it was out of my story that the book story has come, which basically takes that idea that sometimes we get out of alignment with our life and our soul is nudging on us, but we don't stop and listen. And the story is about someone who, in a sense, gets forced to listen to what the soul wants to say to them.
So were you just in like a mentally clogged state in your life and you're like, I'm just going to journal? Like, did it just come to you randomly, or have you always been someone that wrote down your thoughts randomly to kind of have that introspective?
I had tried to journal several times, but it only lasted like a week. But just one day I was like, let me start to journal. I want to create the habit of it. So I wasn't in a bad place that I felt like when I decided to journal. I was just like, let me just journal. The key, though, was I said, I'm not going to judge myself if I don't do it every day. And because it was on an app, I could see the progress. And the first week I journaled like every day, but then it went down to like 2 times, 1 time, 2 times, 1 time each week. But something happened in week 11. All of a sudden it was 5 times, 6 times, 7 times a week. And then it was like that for a decade. So, something to be said there about habits and not judging yourself and sticking with it. But the journal became sort of my window. If there was a crystal ball to my life, it was the journal. And honestly, like Cheyenne, some of the stuff was eerie. It wasn't just like struggling with the same fears or doubts. Like we would understand that. But there were things like I'm I'm in a hospital in Costa Rica, and then because I've got stomach pain, and I look at my journal that night, and a year ago I was in a hospital in Spain getting emergency surgery to take out my gallbladder. Or one day I went to I had the flu, and I couldn't get over it. So finally I run into a Minute Clinic at CVS or something, and I go in there to see the nurse practitioner. And so they're opening up my file, and I'm telling them all my symptoms. And then she goes, "Wait a minute." She goes, "You were already in here today." And I'm like, "No, I wasn't." She goes, "Yes, you were at our beaches location." And here I am thinking she's thinking I'm trying to like abuse the system and get more drugs. I'm like, "No, really, like I've been at home in bed all day." And then she goes, "Wait a minute." She goes, "Oh, that's so weird." She goes, "You were at our beaches location on this day, but 1 year ago." And she goes, "And all your symptoms are the same. I'm just going to copy and paste them into today's file." And that was like more confirmation, like copy and paste. It's like I was living in this orbit, but the orbit was so big that you don't recognize that you're in it. And I think that's actually true to all of us, right? That we we live in these patterns and loops, and all driven by our programs, our paradigms, to try to live a safe life. And that's what it doesn't mean you can't live a good life, but it just means you're going to live an autopilot life. And I want more than that. I want to live my life. Like I want to live in alignment with my soul, because the ego is concerned about safety and let's keep things on autopilot. But the soul craves something bigger, right? It craves expansion. It craves expression through you. And the soul has a purpose. It knows why you're here.
This reminds me of a line that I actually had to write down from your book, because there's just sometimes when I read books where it's almost like mantras are written in that you don't even realize. I think each person is supposed to catch something different, and this one really caught me. I've had this experience in my life, so it just rings so true. But everything you're saying fits this exactly. In the first 3 chapters, you have to get the book. It says, living in service to your soul is often at odds with living in service to the herd. So I feel not only with the ego wanting to be on autopilot, that we're also scared to expand out of our circles and our friendships and the relationships that we might not even realize are on autopilot because they're entrenched so deeply, whether it's in our work life or our friend life. Did you struggle with that when you started to realize not only you're out of alignment, your physical body has been giving you cues for years? How did that unfold for you through all of this?
Yeah, 100%. That was a big awakening to see the extent to how much of my path was actually being dictated by wanting approval from the tribe. And sometimes we don't even want to admit that, because maybe it can sound so pathetic to us, but you've got to start to remove judgment from your life and just be, no, this just is what it is. I didn't change my path because I was worried about what I would lose, the status I would lose, how people would see me. That's okay. As long as you can see that, now we know what we're working with, right? It's like you don't want a doctor to do surgery on you to find out what's wrong and then not actually pay attention to the condition that you're struggling with. And we don't judge it. We just, what is it? So for me, I began to notice it in so many places, even parents, like I'm a grown adult, but yet still I was making decisions that were influenced by parents. Sometimes it was because they want me to do something. Other times it's because they didn't want me to do something. So I'm going to do it because they don't want me to do it. Well, that's still them having this power over you. But whatever your dominant tribe is, for me in that not-for-profit setting, so many people, that becomes your world. It's like for any of us who are working, that becomes your world. And let's say you're working a job right now, but you feel called to do something different, maybe to become a coach or to start your own business. There's all this fear there, right? It's always fear to leave something. But part of that fear is, what are people going to think? What's my mom going to think when I tell her, hey, I quit my job? And especially when they help fund my college, what's my dad going to say? Right. But the soul doesn't care what your mom says, what your dad says. Doesn't mean the soul's not loving. It's just the soul is here for a reason, right? Inside of you. And that reason, that purpose is to fully express yourself in this world through whatever job that's going to be. It could be 100 different jobs, but your true purpose really is to bring the most authentic version of you to this planet. That's the gift to you, and that's the gift you bring to the world.
This is really powerful because I know I've had my own personal experience with a lot of things that you're talking about, but it also does remind me of a documentary I watched where this guy went to talk to a sage on the side of a mountain as well. And he asked him, why is my soul and why is my ego fighting? And the sage said, the ego comes into the world to hit all these markers in life. And there gets to a point where the ego is filled up, it's full. And then that's when you finally feel the emptiness of the soul.
That's a great way to put it. And yeah, we are, like I mentioned this in the book a little bit further, but this idea we have that we think we are in control of our lives, but there's a shadow government. Dr. James Hollis talks about this. There's a shadow government that sits behind the scenes, or like I like to say, a deep state. There's a deep state that actually runs your life. And it's the one that gets you to feel a little bit anxious. And then you're going to, not put your hand up to volunteer for something because you are afraid to fail, or not take that chance, or not launch your business, right? Like some of you who are listening, maybe you've been thinking of writing a book for a long time, or you want to create content and start a YouTube channel, but you don't, right? And why is that? Because there's a deep state running your life. And the deep state is the one that is, hey, let's not do that. Like, why get judged? Why have hate comments? Let's just keep the status quo. And it's so sneaky because it finds things like distraction, procrastination. There's always something good to do that takes you away from what you're really called to do.
So, quoting again from your website, it says, there comes a moment when staying the same is more dangerous than changing. And you had that moment in your life, even though you were extremely successful with what you were doing, but you felt empty. And not to mention the health problems, which I'm so glad that you talked about. I've done so much behind the scenes research of emotions downloading in our body and us rejecting them so much that they become physical ailments, which is why over time in the practices I've done, I've learned to listen to my body instead of saying, oh, I'm getting older. Oh, I have this old injury, all these things that we kind of scoff off. What were the moments forward? Were there other modalities that you used to kind of help get your body and mind and soul in line?
I'm the slow learner. So when I had the health problem, like I'm a healthy person, and I came back from a road trip and I was really tired. And I had all this pain in my legs, which was strange. I didn't know why. And I went to bed and I woke up the next morning and I thought, oh, something's wrong. It felt like somebody had filled all my veins with liquid lead. It was just heavy. And I'm like, I can't even get up. This is so weird. And I remember coming down and even to lift my coffee cup to take a drink, it was like I was lifting in 3 times the gravity. And then that really scared me. I'm like, what's wrong? And I thought, okay, maybe I just am tired. But a week goes by and I'm still like that. 2 weeks goes by. I couldn't work. I was in bed and I started to get worried. What have I done to my body? I have broken something. And I went to doctors and had all these tests, and they're testing me for lupus and cancer and everything. And at the end of the day, they're like, nope, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, there's something wrong with me. I'm glad it's not something serious medically. And that was the first time in my life I was like, I'm going to meditate. I've never meditated before. And I thought, okay, I'm going to learn to meditate. And I did. And that became a great joy. It was like a spa for the mind. And it was so powerful because I'm just like this ADHD person who can't settle down, but I learned to do it. And I would love to tell you, Cheyenne, that was this wake up moment and I just changed everything, but I didn't. As soon as I got better, I went back to the same stuff. And it would take years more before I finally was like, okay, I've had enough. Like I've had enough. My fears just like the guardrails on a road on a high mountain pass, they just keep you on the path. That's what our fear does. Our anxiety just keeps us there. And then finally I was like, no, this isn't. I've got this one life. I'm going to have regrets if I don't make some move. So in all of that, in fact, in that time when I was really sick, that's when I came across the work of Dr. James Hollis. So he's a well-known Jungian psychoanalyst. He's written, I think, 25 books now. But he wrote this book and he talked about the soul and how the soul will summon you to an appointment, but most people ignore it. And that really stuck with me. So it was actually, that was the seed of the idea for the book. This idea that your soul is calling you to an appointment, but we ignore it. But this one character wanders into a village in the remote Andes Mountains in Bolivia, only to find out that there's an appointment with their soul waiting.
Getting into this book, because you leave us on such a cliffhanger when we get to just test it out in the first 3 chapters. My part that I loved the most was picturing like being in the mountains as well. I think that's what was so captivating, is from the moment the story started, you were I specifically, when I read the book, I put myself in there. Maybe I was the character for the minute. Maybe I was the guard that brought him to the guy that could speak in English. I'm so good with jumping around to each character. But the way that you wrote it, I really, really felt like I was there and like my soul was waking up as I was reading it. So I know that this is not only like a fable, but it is based on circumstances that you went through. So I'm curious how you even piece this story together. Like, have you went to the Andes? Have you seen these locations? How did this come alive in your mind to be put on paper?
So not long after that time when I had that health crisis, maybe a year, 2 years later, I decided to sign up for an expedition to climb down in Bolivia. And so I went down and climbed the highest mountain in Bolivia, climbed a bunch of other peaks, got to see some of the culture. It's a really amazing place. Like nobody goes to Bolivia, and which means you should go, because it's less touched than every other country in the world, kind of thing. So that created the backdrop for the story. But I mean, so much of the story is my story. Sometimes it's one of my kids' stories. Sometimes it's people I've worked with, their story. But just that universal thing, that universal question, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? Which is a question we only ask when things are not in alignment. You know, the person who's just loving their life, doing whatever, they don't ask that question. But it's in those moments of crisis or dark nights of the soul that we start to go, wait a minute. And that becomes a struggle, right? Because let's say someone graduates from law school and then they're 2 years into law and they're like, I'm not happy. Like it takes a while to even just admit that, like, because we think, well, I should be happy. Like I just should be grateful. Like look at all the people in the world who don't get to go to education, to have an education. And my parents, helped foot the bill, or now I got this $40,000 student debt, so I have to do law. But the soul sometimes will be like, no, we don't. I got something better planned. You're just too afraid to have this conversation and listen to me. And so we truck on. So yeah, like I said, there's that we get hemmed in, and it's really difficult to break out of that.
When it comes to the soul's calling, especially depending on whose door it's knocking on, for me, I had always had breadcrumbs throughout my life. Like you, I would go back and look at my journals and I would be like, oh my gosh, I've been dealing with this for years. And I just really didn't notice it in my waking life until I sat down and had my journals. But when the soul does hit, it still seems kind of woo-woo and out there. Did you struggle with any of the new things that you were going to come and learn when you realized not only is like my ego kind of fed up, but I'm realizing this part of me that's been with me my whole life, I actually have to give this attention, put belief into it, and probably study about it and what it means to fill your soul?
For sure. There was a lot of, in a sense, pre-programmed judgments that I had to get by. So For example, my parents are both still with me. They're amazing people. My father's 86, my mother's 82. My father was a lawyer, became a judge. He's very science-minded, pragmatic. My mother is Reiki master, crystal boards. My mother would look at your backdrop right now on this video and she would like smile, and my father would roll his eyes. That's the world I came from, right? I am both of them. There's that part of me that can roll my eyes when someone wants to talk about manifestation. And then there's the other part of me that's like, ooh, tell me more. And so even that I've had to push through. But then add on top of that, I had, in a sense, a religious upbringing. And so when you add in, let's say, a religion that maybe you grew up in, like Christianity for me, then it's like this other thing that's set down on you by the people who have taught it to you. In some ways it becomes limiting, so that you go to yoga class and someone from your church goes, oh, yoga, like that's like bad. Like, what? Like, how's yoga bad? Oh, because you're like doing some pose to some other deity. And I'm like, what, really? Like, I don't think so. But there's just like that mindset. And so, but with all of those things, those pillars around us of people who have influenced us, comes an enormous weight to stay within that box. So for me, yes, I think, but this is to me the beauty of life, is when God is so much bigger than how we define God, and there's so much more to learn. So even talking about energy, right? Like, I grew up, even now, like a lot of the friends I hang out with, if I were to bring up a conversation about energy, they would be like, huh? Like, what's wrong with you? Right. But, as I've come to think about that more, believe, or at least even be open-minded about things, are there 7 chakras? I don't know. At least I'm open to that. Before, I was like, who in the world can say there's 7 chakras? But, like I said, I have my father's voice, I have my mother's voice, and say, of course, you have a blockage in your 3rd chakra, right? So I'm caught between these worlds sometimes. But I've learned to be open. I've learned to be open to the things we don't understand, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Your parents are fascinating me. I have a few questions. Do you think that your father would be open to anything in quantum physics to explain manifestation, to keep him out of the spiritual talk and more into the science realm?
He probably would. I find now he's more open to things as he's, in his later years in life, and he just doesn't care as much about the things he used to care about. Of course, he's incredibly smart, but I think that's a good angle. I'm gonna bring that. That's my next conversation with him, Cheyenne. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, definitely. I did an interview yesterday where we were talking about Napoleon Hill and how he actually wrote his book in about the 1930s to help the world and America specifically to get out of the Great Depression. And I have a little bit of background researching his stuff. So when I was looking through it, I was like, this is manifestation, but it is built for business people and left brain people to absorb the concept of manifestation. And he puts it in very simple terms, but it also has a tremendous background in not only quantum physics, but quantum entanglement. So I am like you. I grew up with 2 backgrounds in 2 different houses. We were Baptist here. We were Catholic here. We were also able to explore our own place. We have a lot of very businessmen left brain. I remember I brought up Reiki to my uncle one time, and he said, energy coming out of your body. He's like, you mean like solar panels? And I know he was probably being condescending because he is a very fundamentalist Christian in my mind. So anything on that spectrum is just probably completely demonic in his little mind. I don't want to say little mind, but the little box that I think you kind of put yourself in when you pick a religion. But I bring that up because your mom, on the other hand, which is kind of like my mom, where she's like, yes, we have a Catholic background. If you want to go to mass with your grandparents, you can, but you can also go out and explore if you want to go to this church, if you don't want to go to church. So I had the best of both worlds where they're like, here's your upbringing, this is what you do. But then I had almost like this free spirit over here telling me to go. And when I would go out and explore the world, I would always come back to my mom because she was more open-minded about that stuff. And she would also learn from me. So I'm curious, when you come back and you have conversations with your mom, especially being in anything Reiki master energy, you have a high level of intuition. You can see the spark come back in people's lives, especially when maybe your first language becomes energy over English, is what I tell people. So did you have moments with your mom where you were having these soul expansions and where you looked at her like, maybe, oh, the stuff you've been kind of talking about my whole life, there might be something more to it than just like a placebo effect?
Yeah, for most of my life, sadly, I didn't have those conversations. And, when my mother was a Reiki master, like I just didn't even pay attention to that. And it wasn't, and she would offer to do the odd time when I'd visit home. I can do a Reiki session, and I would just like not really answer, and just then she would drop it. But one time I was on this speaking tour and I did multiple cities, and then I ended up in the Northwest, and they live in Canada. So I flew up to see them, and I was tired. And then my mom was like, I can do a Reiki session. I'm okay, sure, mom, I'll do it. So my mom is like 4'11". She's this folk hippie. And so I lay down on the bed and she starts to do Reiki on me, and her hands are like burning hot. And I'm like, how did her hands like get so warm? So anyways, it was such a relaxing session. And then she said to me after, literally I fell asleep, and she said to me after, she said, your throat, like when I got to your throat, it just like sucked all my energy into it. And here I'd been speaking. And it was just one of those moments. I'm like, like I should have been doing this before with her, like almost a pang of guilt, right? Like I have not given my mother credit for this element of her life, which I do respect more now that I just didn't think about before. But, my mom would join some psychic line where it's a bunch of people and they're all psychic and they're talking. And then she would get off the phone and tell us, and I would see my father. He's very patient. He's very tolerant, but he'd still roll his eyes, and I'd see it. And especially as a son and a father, then even as an adult son, you're like, well, I don't want my dad to roll his eyes at me, so don't talk about that. It's different now. Like I'm now at the place where I could have those conversations with my father to say like, oh, well, maybe that is true. I don't know. But at least I'm open.
I like the open-mindedness, and I really respect the upbringing that both of your parents have, especially for your dad to be so logic and then still allow his wife space to do that. But this also reminds me of some things that I brought up on another interview, which we talked about imposter syndrome heavily, which was really flagging in my mind when you brought up the, I don't want my dad to roll his eyes at me. So seeking validation, seeking approval, seeking applause, whether we're unconsciously doing it or not. How, if you do struggle or did struggle with imposter syndrome, how have you either named the inner critic in your mind or really moved past that to continue the goals that you have in life?
Imposter syndrome has been my ride and die partner in the front seat, literally my entire life. And there's two sides of that coin. So on the one side, because I'd been working in the not-for-profits, and then I decided to launch my leadership development company, then I was speaking in front of corporate audiences. I had all this insecurity of like, well, what do I know? I was only in the non-for-profits, or what do I know about this? What do I know about that? And so I would study harder. And I remember being at a conference one time. I was one of the speakers, and this expert on this topic of motivation was up, and he was speaking. And everything he said, I knew. Every study he cited, I knew. I even knew who the psychologists were. And at the end of that, I'm like, dang, I know at least what he said in his speech. I know everything he just said. Like, it was one of those moments like, you've got to give yourself more credit. So I said there's two sides to the coin on imposter syndrome. I would not be as skilled as a speaker or a coach or a leadership, expert if it weren't for the imposter syndrome, because that insecurity drove me to get better. Because it was ego. I'm not saying it's great, but I'm just saying don't always judge your weaknesses, right? Because sometimes they do serve you. And so where that served me was I just devoted myself to mastery. And someone else who didn't struggle with that, maybe they were ahead of me, but then I leapfrogged them. I got better. So it's not that it was the imposter syndrome, but it was the work to put in. But that was the motivator for me. I think as I've gotten older, I've learned to finally trust myself more. And so, Cheyenne, I've been on probably 3,000 stages. I've spoke on stage more than most people. But honestly, it wasn't until a couple of years ago, I was going up to this hospital and I had to go do a day of training. And usually I'll go and I'll get to the hotel the night before and then, let's go through all the notes, let's go through all the PowerPoint slides. And then I just thought, how many times have you done this? Like, are you really going to sit here and stress in the hotel the night before? And I'm like, no, I quit. Like, I literally quit. I'm going to just go and trust myself that, yeah, I'll look at the notes. That's fine if I need to, but I know this stuff. And so I did, and it was fine. And I don't know if it was ordered or what, but it was fine because I just trusted myself. And I think I'm late to the party in that, trusting myself. And that's what I've learned, especially even going into business, is it's like a poker game. You just got to go all in on you. And if you don't, right, you're going to lose a lot of hands, but you just go all in on you. And what if you lose? You'll be fine because you're all in on you, right? That's the idea in life. So I think part of that for me has been shifting from the sort of ego thinking to a more of a soul-minded thinking, or you might think of like a growth mindset from Carol Dweck. But this idea that the soul wants to expand, it wants to learn. The soul doesn't mope in the corner for 2 days because it failed. The soul is like, oh, okay, that was an experience. What did we learn? And let's keep going, right? The soul is like cheering you on, like, let's go. And the ego is, the one that gets hurt, like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that again.
It kind of has like a pity party, and then your soul's like, there's no judgment here. You're the one who's placing good and bad on both things. So
for sure,
knock all of that off.
So recently, and it's kind of demonstrate this. So, and for everyone listening, I think this can really help you is understanding that if you want to call it fixed mindset, growth mindset, I call it more like an ego mindset and a soul mindset, that the ego's always going to try to pull us into its way of thinking, right? Which is be cautious, don't look stupid. This is why we don't give speeches, because, that would be dangerous. Well, I found out about this storytelling competition that happens in my city. It actually happens in every city. I didn't know. It's called The Moth. So have you heard of it, Cheyenne? You heard of The Moth?
I'm going to write it down and see if it's available in my city, because I like it.
It's called The Moth. So it started in New York. It's spread all across the country. So basically, here's what happens. You go down, and if you want to put your name in a hat, you write your name in a hat, whatever, on a piece of paper. And then during the night, they call out 10 names. And those 10 people have to get up and tell a 5-minute story. And then you're judged by a panel. And then there's a winner, and 1 through 10. So I thought, I had no idea. And like, my life is being on stages and speaking, even though I grew up a totally shy, introverted, farm kid. So I thought, I looked one up, and there was one in my city, and I thought, and it was like in 3 weeks. The next one was in 3 weeks. I'm like, okay, I'm going. And the other voice was like, and you're going to put your name in the hat. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, let me first go watch and see. And then, right, that's the ego. Like, let's mitigate the risk here. And because it would really look bad if you, as a professional speaker, go and like tank in this competition. So let's just go. But the soul was like, no, like, put your name in the hat. Like, let's just do that. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing it right in those moments. I'm going to do this. So I go down there only to find out, like, this is in a theater. There's like balcony. There's hundreds of people in here. I was expecting, 20 people. There's hundreds of people in here. I put my name in the hat. I invited my kids because I thought, well, either for support or maybe I'll win and I'll show them, like, Dad's amazing. So I go and sit with my daughter after I'd put my name in. And then I said to her, you ever do something that you immediately regretted? And she kind of laughed. And I said, well, as long as I don't get called first, because I literally have never seen this. And sure enough, they start the thing and they're like, and our first storyteller tonight, they reach into the hat, James Robbins. And I was like, no. So I go walk down the stairs. I'm thinking, what am I doing? I get up, I tell my story. I went over time. I didn't use the secret word they want you to use every time. And but the good news was at the end, when I was finished, I was in first place until the second speaker went. Then I was in second place, and then I was in third, and then I was in fourth. Later, I was in fifth, and I ended the night in sixth place. And my kids actually left halfway through, and I was just sitting there, and I was like so ego hurt, right? Like I was ego hurt, ego embarrassed, and I'm like, I'm glad nobody knows that I have so much experience, because there's not a single person in there who has been on stage more than I am. I could just bet my life on that. And I was saying to my partner later driving home, and I said, I finally got past the ego. And I was like, it's actually kind of funny that I'm like this professional speaker and I just got wiped out at a local storytelling competition. But here's the thing now. So that was the experience. Now, that story I told you, I now tell that story on stages. But think about it. Which story would people want to hear? Oh, and I decided to go in the storytelling competition because I've done this 3,000 times and I got first place. And where's the story in that? Where's the experience? Where's the impact on people? And yet the soul is like, no, let's going to do this. And then, I get wiped out. But the soul is like, wow, that was an experience. Like, hey, what did we learn? What do we do better next time? Like, that's amazing. But the real version of the story is what I told you. That encourages people, that inspires people. And so in that way, the soul expresses its desire, and it's adventurous. And it's sometimes the soul is definitely a bit scary to the ego.
Well, I think the vulnerability and the mess ups is where you can capture people, because you're right. If we're just going to put someone on stage and they check all the boxes, they get all the A's, and they're just perfect, at the end of the day, that has a form of inspiration, but I feel it is more ego inspiration than soul inspiration, where it's like, oh, well, he tripped up a little bit and he got up and kept going. I can too.
Yeah, exactly. You see ego inspiration everywhere, right? Especially online, especially with a lot of young men. They make a lot of money, and then, let's flash this lifestyle, cars, boats, yachts, whatever it might be. And then other people see that, and the ego wants that. I mean, my ego wants that. Like, it's just like, oh yeah, I want that. And what I've learned as I've gotten older is that even the things you think you want in your life, your goals and your dreams, you have to actually really look at those. So I'll give you an example. And this makes its way into the book. I used to carry this stone in my pocket. It was a gold stone, and I had engraved on it $1 million. So I wanted to make $1 million in a year. And I carried it every day through airports, doesn't matter where I was, carried this stone. But after a couple of years of carrying this stone, I was no closer to this goal. And one day I thought, well, why do you want this? Why do you want $1 million? Like, what's that going to do for you? And when you sit with that, the answer was, because then I'll feel successful, which means I wasn't feeling successful. And then it hit me, this isn't about $1 million. This is about taking away shame. And I don't need $1 million to take away shame. And so that's an example of, we have these goals that we get revved up about, but it actually might be the wrong mountain. There's nothing wrong with the goal of $1 million. What's wrong is who's desiring that. Is the ego? Is it trying to take something away that you don't need $1 million to take away? Or is it because, hey, I want to do some really good stuff with it and help all these people, or have freedom for myself, or, okay, that's totally different. So often it's taking a look at our goals and dreams under the light of, why do I really want this? Is this actually in alignment with my soul? And this has been difficult for me, because so much of my life, when I was 19, 20, 21, I was like, I will be rich. I know that I will be rich. Like, that was the mindset. But my soul has been wired differently, that's not the most important thing. And Have you ever done the Myers-Briggs personality test?
Yes, we did that. Well, I mean, we used to do that at our company when we get hired as salary or going and get salaried managers. And that thing was intimidating to have someone slam on a desk in front of you.
For sure. Well, I remember doing the Myers-Briggs, and I'm an INFP, and so it comes out as the healer. And I'm like, the healer? That's so lame. Like, I wanted to be the INTJ. I want to be the ENTJ, right? The executive, like, or that's what I want to be. Why am I the healer? That's so lame. And I've come to realize, like, no, that's not lame. That's actually very resonant for you. So again, it's like a peeling of an onion. I hope everyone listening to this, you can learn the lessons faster than I did. But maybe that's one of the reasons I'm here, is just to pass on lessons that hopefully people will get them earlier.
I feel the same way about your work and my work and anybody else that's out there trying to influence and honestly just document their human experience with non-judgment and put it out in the world. And maybe it's for people coming up in the world, maybe it's people presently changing, or even future generations to come that are just walking in a bookstore one day and their soul pulls them towards that book. Because I know that I've been that kid from a very young age. And I can just imagine with luckily that books will hopefully be around and we don't all switch to Kindles in the future, that we can all have those moments where our soul is going to tap us on the shoulder and breadcrumb us.
It's funny you say breadcrumbs. That comes up later in the book about looking at breadcrumbs in your life, because it's amazing that when you look back, there's a trail. Mm-hmm. And it's just often we don't notice it, but there's a trail that already has given hints of what you're supposed to do.
I don't want you to give anything away in the book. I know that I'm on a cliffhanger. I'll be happy to put the link below for people to not only purchase, but if they also want to hang on a cliff on the first 3 chapters as well. But can you tell us anything else in the book to kind of entice us to open it more, or maybe who in their world would be needing this book right now?
So the book starts out with this character named Riley, and they're basically get lost in the Bolivian wilderness, and there's some scary moments. Well, they ended up wandering into this village, and that's where they meet this sort of mysterious guide named Santiago. And Santiago breaks the news eventually that it's not an accident that you're here. You've been called to climb. And so Riley has to make this decision to climb, but there's this tension in Riley, because the other side of Riley is like, this is so stupid. Like, there's no way, which is that's my father and my mother. They're both in this moment, right? And the other part is like, well, maybe I am here for something bigger. So anyways, as the book goes on, Riley is climbing this mountain, but all kinds of things happen. But there's one scene where I can say this, they descend down into a glacier, down into a crevasse, into this glacier cave. And Santiago, the main character, he goes over to this big wall of ice and chips this piece off and brings it to Riley and says, this was frozen about 100,000 years ago, which is why scientists love to study glaciers. And trapped in it there's air bubbles from 100,000 years ago. It just keeps a memory, but this is like your subconscious. It just keeps a memory of everything. And it is like a glacier is just moving. You're not stopping it, but no one can see it moving. And the subconscious is a bit like that. It's just running the show, but you don't notice it's running the show. And so that's part of Riley's journey, is beginning to wake up and become intentional about, wait a minute, what do I want? Right? Which is a really difficult question for people to answer. Like, what do I want? And one of the reasons that's difficult to answer is because people don't know themselves enough. And so as you get to know yourself, you start to get more clear with, what do you want, right? Not what are you allowed to want. What do you want? And to not be apologetic about that. Like, we're so apologetic about our dreams, or we have dreams. We don't want to tell our friends. What would they think? But who cares? It's your life. How are you going to live it? So yeah, and as the climb unfolds, lots of things happen. There's moments of thinking of quitting, and
I can't wait to finish this book.
I can't wait to hear what you think. So you'll have to fill me in.
Well, I'll definitely send you an email, but I will definitely put a review anywhere that I can because I know how special those are for authors as well.
Thank you, Cheyenne.
I will put all of your information below for anybody that wants to see it, but is there a special place that you would like people to reach out to you for any information, resources, online courses?
The best place about the book is to go to iwillclimb.com, iwillclimb.com. And if you're on LinkedIn, yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Let me know that you saw me on Cheyenne's show here. I'd love to connect.
Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story and your book with us, James.
Thanks, Cheyenne.
Have a good day, friends. We'll see you on the next episode.